Hey, everybody, welcome to Sex is Medicine. I am your host, Devi Ward Erickson, and I am so delighted to be here with you yet again for another juicy, delicious, and enriching episode of Sex is Medicine, which has just won the ASECT Award, 2020 award for the best live web series. So that is amazing. You are now listening to an official award-winning show with my award-winning guests. It's so wonderful. And another point of celebration is I would just like to take a moment to honor and to celebrate justice happening in the United States. We just received notice that the murderer of George Floyd, Derek Chauvin, will be held accountable and has been convicted on all counts of the murder of George Floyd. So just want to send a prayer out to George Floyd's family, to all of the people who have been harmed and traumatized through that event and the persistence of police violence against Black Americans in the United States. Blessings and peace to all of us surviving that. So this evening, on Sex is Medicine, we're going to talk, this is very apropos, we're going to talk about conscious relationships. Because if we're at war in our intimate relationships, we're going to be at war in our society. So my guest today is going to help walk us through what a conscious relationship looks like, and how we can begin cultivating that in our own lives so we can have peace, harmony, and happiness, and joy and pleasure instead of dysfunction and trauma.
Yes.
That is not fun. So my guest this evening is Lee Noto. Am I pronouncing that correct?
That is perfect.
Yay. And I'll just read a little bit about Lee. Lee guides women on a journey to embodying their inner high priestess so that they can create a deep and intimate relationship with themselves, which is primary, and effortlessly create their dream partnership. Her mission is to help women feel empowered and free in their expression. And I'm going to stop there because I would rather hear it from your mouth than mine. All about you, Lee. So you started your career with a bachelor's in business or performing arts, or what? Which was it?
Yeah. So I started with a bachelor's in entrepreneurship and Spanish.
In
And
Spanish,
then,
specifically.
yes, specifically Spanish. One of the romance languages.
That's why.
Yeah. And then I went on to get my master's in education. So I was running the corporate realms for a while and was a New York City slicker woman entrepreneur. And my career and my life just took a different turn after that.
Wow. So New York, that's intense to hit the ground running in New York.
It was really intense. It's fascinating because I've lived in many places around the US, and there is a palpable sexual energy in New York that I've never felt anywhere else. I describe New York as a woman. She's like a tough broad, and she will tell you what she thinks and she won't hold anything back. But if you take her up on it, she will give you incredible opportunity to know yourself, to know culture, to know the world. And there is just this aliveness there that is palpable, and sexual energies all around.
Yeah, wow. So is that what attuned you or got you connected with wanting to be an intimacy and sexual expression coach for women and couples?
So that's where I rediscovered this. I had a knowing from very early in my childhood without knowing what specifically it would look like or what this thing would be called. But I did reawaken to it while I was living in New York, and found myself to be a part of a tantric apprenticeship. And so I served in New York as a tantric body worker for a number of years, and I just felt so at home in that community.
Wow. Wow. So it was through the practice of sacred sexuality that you were able to kind of reignite and reclaim those passions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so then what geared you towards the concept of creating conscious partnership? What was, so I'll just say that for many of us who are in the field of sacred sexuality and healing and awakening, it's a result of our own journey of healing and awakening. We go through a transformation, kind of like the phoenix rising from the ashes, and then we're like, hey, let's share this with everybody. So for you, what awakened that desire to support other people in cultivating conscious partnerships?
It was the deep desire within myself. There was something I always knew. I had envisioned what this kind of relationship could be like without ever having had one.
Yeah.
And it's that feeling you get when you're like, I know there's something more. I may not know anyone who's created it. I may not have ever created it for myself, but if I can conceive of it, then it must be possible.
Correct.
I must be able to, wield my pure power to create something like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just following the next
Mm-hmm.
breadcrumb with no real idea of exactly where I'd end up. And as it turns out, I ended up creating conscious partnership myself, which was the whole intention. And I was just on the journey of, okay, what else within me wants to be discovered? What else within me wants to be known by myself, wants to be loved, wants to be acknowledged and witnessed? And as I went on that journey, I uncovered more and more and more of myself. And that unraveling and unfurling into myself was what allowed me to create what I have with somebody else now.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. So in Tantra, we say, in Buddhist sexual Tantra, we say inside, outside, same. So I love that
Mm,
as we go through this internal transformation, our external reality mirrors that for us.
yes, yes.
So, in your view, what is a conscious partnership? Because that's a term that kind of gets thrown around a
It is.
lot. And so, what are some like definitive examples or signposts to look for in terms of conscious partnership?
Right. Well, exactly what you just said hits it. Inside, outside, same. What our relationship is with ourselves is what we can create with another, with a beloved.
Mm-hmm.
And so the journey in this partnership, both prior to creating the partnership and now, and I see this across so many partnerships, is what's happening within is happening within the larger context of the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest, I don't know if I'd say distinguishing factors, but one of the things that I see present in people that have created just stunning, remarkable relationships are that they have a really solid relationship with themselves
Mm-hmm.
and they are willing to be relentless in taking a stand for themselves.
Wow. Yeah,
And it,
that's such an important piece right there. The
mhm,
relentlessness in taking a stand for ourselves. That's huge.
yeah. The word that comes up for me so often is integrity. What does radical personal integrity and responsibility mean when we show up for ourselves? Because truly there is no judge, right? We want to project judge onto other people, onto our parents, onto members of the opposite sex, whatever. And there is no judge. And so when we show up with integrity in relationship with ourselves in a way that feels aligned, we naturally attract people who are showing up in integrity with themselves and with the world and in the work that they do. And that I think is one of the foundational pillars of what people call conscious partnership is people who are willing to take a look and see what's underneath the hood and hold a space for themselves with unconditional presence and acceptance as much as we can as humans.
Mm-hmm.
And they're willing to show up for themselves like that. And they're willing to show up for other people like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what alchemizes, conflict and challenge into transformation is this willingness to show up like, okay, this feels challenging right now. How can I show up for myself? What do I need? How can I show myself that I've got my own back, that I love myself? And how do I do that for my partner? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's that ethos that I've seen people who come together in those relationships hold.
Yeah, and that right there is so deep because that primary relationship that we have with ourselves is so for so many people I see and I know myself but so many people just in the world looking at it is so wounded right? So much of the way that we are raised in the society thwarts, quite frankly, our ability to have and nurture that deep, sense of self-connection. And for those of us who are trauma survivors, that's very, one of the main ways trauma functions is to disconnect us from our own bodies, our intuitive wisdom, our intuitive awareness. So that piece right there, cultivating a rich and authentic and honest relationship with our own selves, and loving relationship, like that's it right there. And that's the struggle, though. That's the piece. How do we do that? It's the most important pillar, but how do we access that? How do we get there? How do we claim that space?
We choose.
Yeah.
That's it. I tell you, I can't tell you how many times I have metaphorically beat my head against a wall because I just made it so hard for myself. I thought it has to be linear. It's time bound. It's a journey. It's progressive. I'm getting there. I'm working on it. I'm trying. I said it all. And I attracted the perfect partner into my life because he reminds me constantly. And sometimes it pisses me off because I want to make it hard. He's like, it doesn't have to be so hard. You just choose how you want to feel, choose how you want to show up, and keep your word. Just keep your word, honor your word, show up with integrity. Choose to be done with the self-diminishing talk. Choose to be done with the looking at your face in the mirror and picking at it and judging, or judging your stomach or your thighs. Just choose to be done and choose something that feels better. And it's so trivial, such a trivial idea. It's so simple. Yet often we find that in the simplicity, there is profound truth.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I will say, though, because that concept of choose is prevalent throughout many of the disciplines that I've done. And yet again, as a trauma survivor, you don't have a choice until you have a choice. So those discursive neural pathways that are literally entrenched in the brain matter, in the gray tissue of the brain, those require work to transform. And at a certain point, after all the meditation and masturbation and all that work, like now I have something arise. I'm like, oh, I don't want to think that crusty thought about myself. I'm just going to look out the window. Right. So now I actually have a choice. But until you have a choice, you don't have a choice. So, 20-year-old Devi, when she was entrenched in her trauma, someone say, oh, we'll just make a choice. I was like, fuck you. I don't have a choice. All I know is trauma. So there is some work to get to that point of being having the privilege, I will say, and the spaciousness internally to actually have a choice, to have something different to choose for. Right?
I love that you mentioned this, because I agree with you, because my partner would say this to me all the time. And I'm like, go screw yourself. I am in a trauma response right now where my body's in dissociation and I am numb. That is not a cognitive function. My body is releasing morphine because it thinks I'm going to die. And I would,
right now.
So just so you know, and it would frustrate me to no end. And a part of the work that we do, which I think is extremely relevant to this conversation around liberation through and on the path of traumatic experiences, is for folks who have experienced those kinds of events and is living in the body, is finding a modality, finding practitioners, finding ways to support ourselves so that we can get into the body.
Yes.
The solution for that kind of healing is not a cognitive process. It is not like, oh, I can just think my way out of this, right? So yes, choose. And we are bodies. We are bodies who are holding on to experiences and who've not been taught how to complete traumatic responses through our nervous systems. So in order to do that kind of healing, we have to get into the nervous system, because our nervous system is what's called primary consciousness. So we have secondary consciousness, which is our faculty, our new brain, our neocortex, reasoning, logic, all the stuff that gets us through our adulting lives. Primary consciousness is the nervous system. So finding a modality and support and practitioners who can really support you in getting into the nervous system so that the body can do what it's naturally meant to do when the mind stops throwing blocks up. The
Yes.
body will complete trauma responses. The body will shake. The body will scream. The body will release and emote if we allow it to do what it does. So that, I think, gives the fuller picture of,
Yeah.
yes, choose and choose to be in your body so that you can continue to live your fullest life.
I love that. Choose and choose to be in and present with the body.
Yes.
Yes, I love that. I love it. And then from there, all growth and change and transformation occurs. Yeah,
Yes.
I love that. I love that. So, what are some again signposts of if we're in a conscious relationship? Like how are we going to know? What's happening on a day-to-day basis? Like give us an example or a few examples of like what can we look for? Like, yeah, we're either in conscious partnership or we're moving towards that.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to just say as a joke is you're getting your ass handed to you. That's one sign. That's one sign. You're getting your ass handed to you in the best way that leads to beautiful evolution and development. And it's almost like your partnership is a petri dish for growth. It's a catalyst for your growth and your expansion, both as an individual, as person in partnership, as a human. And while it is a catalyst for expansion, which can sometimes feel challenging and triggering and all of the things, you also feel deeply safe. You
Mm,
feel safe to go there. And you're like, okay, I'm about to lose my shit. And I know I can do that here. I know that I have cultivated safety within myself. There is safety in our relationship container. And this is a part of my exploration. That's safety is so underrated and not talked about as a core component that leads to the most mind-blowing sex, the most expressed sexuality, the deepest embodiment of oneself is feeling safe.
I
That's
yeah.
that's the sign.
I love that piece right there because you're absolutely correct in my opinion that it's one of the most underrated elements. And yet it is the core component because if we aren't safe, the body's going to be in a defensive circuit, right? And you
Mhm.
can't have great orgasms if your body's in fight or flight,
Right.
right? You can't have, connection if you're in a defensive and if you're in a defensive circuit. So that visceral, it sounds like that visceral body felt sense of safety with another human being is so precious and so vital,
Yeah.
and I think so hard for many of us to access.
Yeah. I was there for most of my life, and my partner, bless him, he had to do a lot of convincing for
Yeah.
me to even conceive of the idea that I could be safe, that I could be supported and provided for in a way that really challenged my previous sense of self.
Yeah.
Because, like so many others, I thought, and especially as someone who identifies as a woman, I got to take care of myself. I'm independent. I've got to do this. Nobody else has got my back. All of these conditioned beliefs, and here comes this amazing partner, and I'm like, who do you think you are? I don't need to be taken care of. I'm good. I was good before you. And there was just this idea of radically surrendering into the relationship container and into somebody else, and ultimately into myself, into the
Mhm.
trust and safety within myself to really just let go and open up. Is It was very challenging, and I get why it can feel that way for people. So yeah, it can be. And what's on the other side is just utter beauty.
Well, yeah, as you're talking, I'm getting like little shivers and little tingles in my body because having a container that we can like what is the word? Like shed the layers of protection and
Mhm.
blossom into vulnerability. Like that is the healing of those traumatic wounds. That
Yes.
is the healing of those attachment wounds, is to be able to do that little by little, centimeter by centimeter, but continuously on an ongoing basis. And to have more and more of our souls revealed to another human, to be seen, right? And That's God, right? Is to be seen in your entirety and to see another in their entirety, their humanity,
Yeah.
beyond their divinity,
So
but to
good.
see each other in our humanity. That's God right there, totally and transparently and completely. And that it's like the saying, like, the journey is the goal, or the path is the
Mhm.
goal, right? So what you're
Mhm.
describing of surrendering into this container and allowing yourself to be seen in every nuance and every striation and all its variations, that is both the goal and the path.
Yes. Oh, the way you say it is like poetry.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my
As
gosh, you're saying it, and I'm like, yes, that's what it is. If words could come close enough to describe the experience, which they totally don't,
yeah,
those were the words for it.
yeah, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. It's a big deal. So in this container of trust and transparency, and it sounds like also a an agreement that a commitment to growth, a mutual
Yes.
commitment to growth. Because if one of us in the relationship is like, I want to grow and evolve, and the other person's like, yeah, I'm not interested in any self-awareness whatsoever, that's not going to be a
Yeah.
good match. So having a good
Right.
match, mutual shared worldview, mutual goals and desires, all of that. And so we have
Mhm.
that established, we have this wonderful container. Conflict's going to happen. Like, that's just,
Yeah.
again, our wounds are going to get triggered and rub against each other. Someone's going to misunderstand something and it's going to turn into an argument. And then 3 hours later, like, oh, but I used the wrong word. I didn't mean to use that word. It was the wrong word, right?
Yeah.
So how do we navigate these areas of friction with grace to be
Mm.
pass through them and get to the other side?
The first one's a lot of compassion. We're not going to nail it every time. We're not going to show up with nonviolent communication every time and follow the format and, speak from the first person I. Sometimes finger pointing happens, sometimes projection happens, sometimes stonewalling and gaslighting happens. And, those things seem uh, so much like territory that is shameful for us to navigate.
Mhm.
And it's having compassion at a baseline for when things feel challenging for us and we choose something that doesn't feel aligned. We choose a behavior that doesn't feel aligned, or, we see our partner doing that. If we can operate with an undertone of compassion, even when we get pissed off, even when we project, if we can come back to that as home base,
Mm.
then there's a real good chance that we can say, okay, all right, what's happening here? Like, I know we really love each other. If that's the place I'm operating from at my core, then we can figure anything out. So now what? So that's sort of foundational key. And as we do that, being willing to create intimacy with ourselves. Something I tell clients all the time is, we talk about behaviors and tendencies that they're ashamed of, whether that's projecting anger or shutting down. And I say, can you take that part of you on a date? Like, can you get to know it and get intimate? Like the way you'd go on a date and you'd want to get to know the person, you'd ask questions, you'd see
Mm.
what lights them up. Like, take your shame out on a date, take your anger out on a date, and let that be a territory that you navigate with love and intention and care. And Trevor Hall, a singer, has this phrase for it called the fruitful darkness.
I
And it
love
is like the darkness that bears fruit for us. Can we show up to ourselves and our partners and navigate through those cavernuses with an appreciation for the fact that it is just a part of our human experience? And sometimes it feels edgy and prickly and nasty and just disgusting. And that's just another expression of something that we can feel or experience. Knowing great joy without knowing great grief isn't the same. Like, to know that joy and that orgasmic bliss, we also know pain and suffering. And so this is just another area to navigate if we just shifted our perspective a little from this being this thing you always do that you're never going to stop doing, that is a pain in my ass and it's because of who you are, to, okay, that's something that feels really prickly for you. and that we've identified that that comes from this point in your childhood. And wow, it's so cool to have access to this information about ourselves. How else can we explore? How else can we show up with compassion? And how well can we get to know our inner terrain so that we can become aware of when triggers come up? We can become aware of our own somatic experience and say, oh, my chest is tightening. I know that what I call anger is coming on. What do I need to do? I need to take a step away.
Yeah.
And we just learn these things because we're willing and open to working with them instead of shutting them down, which means we'll never make progress in getting to respond differently when that thing comes up. But we're open and we're like, okay, now what? How do I handle this? Because I'm open to seeing how my body works and what it's telling me. And I know that I am coming back to a relationship that's based on love for myself and for my partner. Okay, let's find a solution.
Yeah, there's so much in what you said, and I love the concept of going out on an information seeking date with these aspects of ourself, the shadows, so to speak, these aspects of
Mhm.
ourselves that we want to hide or get away from or divorce ourselves from. And yet very often these fragmented aspects of our psyche have a wealth of information and are just a treasure trove. Like, I know for me, I've been like shamed for expressing anger my whole life. Like, oh, bad Davy. And I've realized over the last years, like, oh, my expression of anger is a healthy reaction to abuse. I
Mhm.
look back at the instances in which, I got shamed for expressing anger. It was usually me pushing back against poor behavior, shitty behavior, abusive behavior from the people in my environment or the people in my community or society at large, right? There's only
Yes.
so much we can take. So it's actually what I've discovered in embracing this part of myself that I've been told is not lovable, but
Mhm.
embracing it and inquiring, going out on a date with it, asking it, is that it's actually a healthy part of myself that's trying to express itself,
Yeah.
right? And so that is so valuable because that's what happens in partnerships, particularly conscious partnerships, is all these wounded aspects of our psyche arise to be integrated and healed, because it's like, well, what a great
Yes.
opportunity, we've got all this love and compassion, let's use it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's our own individual and internal willingness to, even in the face of judgment with our partners, I think, to be able to, like you said, radically and fiercely love ourselves, so that even if the partner is saying, oh, you shouldn't be so angry, it's like, okay, well, what is that anger actually about? This part of
Mm.
myself that's arising, like, what am I feeling? What am I needing? What is this part of myself trying to communicate to me?
Yeah.
And that it's being expressed in this strategy, this way that is not meeting other people's needs to NVC it. But for me,
Right.
it's a healthy expression. That the emotion itself is not wrong. It's a indication of a need for deeper self-awareness and deeper attunement. So I love that
Mm.
concept of, instead of continuing to fragment and reinforce that fragmentation, to embrace it and to use that information to help us connect more deeply with what
Yes.
our soul is asking for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you are a poet.
Oh.
I'm like shaking my head because the way you're saying this is just, oh, it's like lighting all of my cells up.
Mercury must be in a good position right now. I'm being articulate.
I feel like it's all you. It's all you. Let's just be real. Let's be real.
The other thing that you said that was really meaningful to me is again having this foundation, again, this mutual agreement of compassion.
Mhm.
Because that's the other thing that occurs in relationships, as we know, is when some of that shit hits the fan, so to speak, it can be scary, because it's like, oh my God, does this mean the end? Particularly if we have attachment wounds around being abandoned, right? If I
Yes.
express my emotions authentically, everyone's going to leave me, right? That's
Mhm.
stories that many of us have.
Yeah.
So having that agreement that no matter what, that foundation of compassion will always be a well that you guys can continuously dip into and come back to, is really, really important. And that's
Yes.
maturity.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yay. So when it comes to holding space, because that's kind of what we're discussing right now, right?
Mhm.
Is being able to hold a container of compassion or be present with each other in this container. How do we do that? That's a question that comes up often as well. Like when we're teaching people Tantra, and they're like, oh, okay, so they might, be purifying or releasing emotion. And people are like, well, how do I hold space for that? What do I do? So what does it mean to hold space and how do we do that?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I have found that has been one of my greatest teachers in learning how to hold space, which is being the space in which transformation occurs, right? It could be our own transformation, it could be the transformation of another, but we are not, as the space holders, we are not taking up space. We are not imposing our will, our perception. We are pure space. This is divine masculine presence, the space in which the feminine animates and emotes and expresses. As space holders, you are there. You are creating safety in the container by saying, okay, I'm here. Show me what you got. Like, be real. And I'm here in non-judgment, in loving compassion, and in observation of anything that comes up within me. And now's your time. That's how I see space holding is really being the space in which someone can be and release and express and emote and whatever comes up. And one of the things that has helped me cultivate my ability to space hold is to learn how to be with my own discomfort. The
Yes.
the first thing we want to do when we get uncomfortable, and one of the places that I typically feel most uncomfortable is when shame arises for me. And I'm
Yeah.
like, get me the hell out of Dodge. Anything but this. I will project on you. I will lash out. I'll shut down. I'll slam the door. Please just don't see me because I don't want to feel shame. That's one of the hardest times for me. And when I learned how to just dip my toe in a little more and just stay in the conversation, let my face be seen, and while touching my body for safety or while doing what allows me to feel embodied and grounded, that has really allowed me to show up as a space holder because I have seen what the rage feels like and looks like inside of me, what the shame looks like and feels like, and it's palpable, it's potent. And when I know what that's like for me, when someone else is going through that, I'm like, oh, I know what they're going through. I'm just going to sit here and let them do it. And if they need help and they ask for it, cool. Otherwise, I'm just going to love the shit out of them. And because I know what it's like. And that, because I know what it's like and I've allowed myself to go to those places, I have no desire to impose my will or my perception or anything that is quote unquote mine onto them. I just, you just let them do what they do. And that's what I think is really cool about space holding.
Yeah. And I love what you pointed out here is that it's our ability to hold space with our own discomfort that
Hmm.
allows us to be present with someone else's discomfort, because that's the thing. If I'm uncomfortable with my own discomfort, then as soon as I start to see your discomfort arise, it's going to trigger my discomfort and be like, oh wait, we got to stop that. Let Here's a tissue, make it go away, right?
Yeah.
But as solid and fluent we
Mm.
are and being able to just hold space for our own discomfort, then we can extend that same space to others. And then the other thing that you said that really stuck out for me is that non-judgment.
Yeah.
That is sacred space,
Mhm.
non-judgmental space. Because if I'm holding space, but I'm judging the fuck out of you, you're gonna feel that.
Yes,
Right? That's not
100%.
that's not really holding space. That's just like holding my tongue.
Yeah, it's like, I want you to know I'm holding space for you right now.
Exactly. And you're really fucking up right now. We're gonna talk
Yeah.
about this later.
Yeah.
And I'm judging the shit out of you.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I've been there. I've definitely been there.
So the other thing that's coming to me in this conversation is this is we're discussing intimate partnerships, which are like kind of like I was going to say the battleground, but that's not the image they want to bring, because this isn't really a battleground. It's in the trenches, so to speak, right? And
Mhm.
depending on where we are in our journey, it can be more or less volatile. I will say that at
Yeah.
this point in my life, through my journey and my healing, this is like the least volatile relationship I've ever had because of each of our own personal development, and we come together and blah de blah.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's still intense because we're in the trenches working through our stuff. That's
Mhm.
why there's equanimity. That's why there's balance. There's why there's all of these wonderful things, is because we're doing our homework, but we're doing it together,
Yes.
copying each other's notes, so to speak. And where I'm going with this is it seems to me that these same theories and concepts can be applied to our relationships outside of just the sexual romantic ones. So our friendships, our business partnerships, moving out slowly and gently, creating our mandala of
Hmm.
community out to the infinite reaches. But it seems as though like that it will easily and effectively translate and begin to influence our other relationships that are not sexual. Is that what you found in terms of conscious partnership?
Yes, absolutely. How we do one thing is how we do everything. And when we do that with ourselves, we do it everywhere. I It's something I learned along the way, and I share with others now, is like the one thing that we would ever need to, really focus on is that relationship with ourselves. When that is solid, when we cultivate that in this conscientious way, and we create conscious partnership within ourselves such that our inner masculine and feminine are so integrated, there's this inner oneness. How the heck could we not just be in the world as the person who creates that, with our partners, with our parents, with our children, our siblings, our business partners, the passersby? It just is who we are, because that's who we are with ourselves. So yes, it absolutely, it seeps into every area of life.
Yeah. And that to me is kind of the key to world peace ultimately, right? So what we do here is, you say, the way we do one thing is how we do everything. But if we're talking about having a planet that we can actually live on together without murdering each other, and, and the planet itself, it's about the investment in our own right relationship with
Hmm.
ourselves, and the investment in our own right relationship with our partners, and then our community, however
Hmm.
large or small that is, and then it ripples out from there. But if
Yeah.
we can't have healthy, open relationship in our most intimate partnerships, and ultimately with ourselves, then how could we ever expect to have that in the world at large?
Right. And that we are at the precipice of all of that right now. I don't know that ever in history before has it been as demonstrable as it is now, that this, what is happening in our outer landscape, is a reflection of the hero and heroine's journey that we're all on, the transformation, the ascension for some, the very deep struggle for others, and everywhere in between. Like what's happening in the world right now is, I think, there's not a word for it. Transformational, incredible. There's something that we are all collectively going through. We are all in this birthing process, and
Mhm.
we're at different points in the conception and labor and birthing and all of it, and that is so evident in what's happening in the world around us.
Yeah. Yeah. And such a clear example, as we said, of inside, outside, same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that comes up in intimate partnerships that makes it hard to connect and have this shiny, happy people holding hands are projections. And I know for me, like, I'll see if I can, I'm sure there's so many examples, but we'll see if I can capture one of them. Oh, I'll say, okay, so for me, like, audience land, you get to the inner workings of Devi and her relationship. So this is actually a celebration I'm going to share, because it was where I caught myself projecting. So there was like I don't know, a dynamic that was occurring with my husband and I was judging him for it a bit. And then like we were taking it, but I wasn't verbalizing the judgment. I was just silently judging. and, and then we were like sitting in the bathtub and we were talking, and I had this epiphany. I was like, oh, this is something that I really don't like about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see it in you, and it's like I want to stamp it out. I want
Yeah.
to destroy it be gone, Satan. When
Yes.
actually it's this thing inside of myself that it's kind of like I'm also kind of trying to distract myself from. I'm trying to escape from it. It's
Yeah.
easier to make it your fault than it is for me to be like, oh shit, that's my own
Yep.
funky junky thing going on. So is that how you view projections as well? It's like these janky things inside of us that we're trying to smear all over other people.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've seen that. Oh gosh, I've seen so many of my own projections. And it's typically that, or it's something that we saw in one of our primary caretakers growing up that we vowed to never be like. So we're like just so the opposite. And when we see the stark, imagery in front of us, we're like, hell no.
Yeah.
Or it's something in us that we feel ashamed about, something that we don't feel completely integrated with, something that really triggers us and causes us to feel uncomfortable. I mean, the world of projection is so fascinating. The really cool, trippy, psychedelic thing about how all of this works is that we're just all operating in fractals. So it's when we see it in someone else, it's so fascinating that it reflects something back in us, whether it's that same quality or maybe the opposing quality, whatever it is. And there's such a gift in seeing it in someone else if we take it as a gift, because
Mhm.
it can allow us to introspect back and say, I wonder what this is bringing up in me. What
Mhm.
about this triggers me? And to have just that one extra step of exploration beyond the you, I can't
Mhm.
believe you, opens a world to so much insight, so much inner wealth, so much, just such deeper understanding, compassion for ourselves and others. And my partner and I often have those conversations when something like that comes up for us. It's like, what is that bringing up in you that you
Mm.
saw that in this person?
Mhm.
And we'll talk about that. And it's, how else would we have seen a part of ourselves? Because we're living in the first person. Certainly there are blind spots, but these sorts of projections and other people help us find the unconscious material within ourselves.
Mhm. So I'm going to throw a curveball at you here, though. So
Do it.
because this is all well and good, and there's another element of like certain personality disorders, like
Hmm.
like a
Hmm.
cluster B personality disorder that
Yep.
so takes advantage of that projection and that like that whole kind of psychology behind, if you see it in someone else you see it in me. And sometimes what you're actually dealing with is a mental illness or
Yes.
or a personality disorder, and it isn't like, oh, what I'm sensing and seeing isn't really about something in me. It's actually like you're just kind of fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is absolutely a possibility too. And I've been on a journey like that myself, in having people like that in my life and also showing up with my own dynamics, my own condition dynamics. And, I've also seen the people who end up in relationships like that, hopefully there is some sort of solution or resolution for them on the other side of it. And for the people I've spoken to who've been in relationship with someone who has narcissistic personality disorder, or some other state of potential imbalance, um, they when they come out on the other side, there's such a more profound understanding of self and such a deeper level of trust in self because of what they got to experience. And now that's not definitive for everyone, but for the folks I've spoken to, where eventually they realized, okay, this wasn't me. It just wasn't. There was something that I saw in all of the people, all of the friends and clients that have experienced stuff like that. That's like, and you know what? I know more of who I am now. I have I know more of me. I know where my trust is with myself, where my love is with myself. I know where my boundaries are. There's something that gets cultivated, that can be cultivated in the process. And sometimes it's not always what does that bring up in me? Sometimes there is something about the other that is just there.
Yeah. And regardless, it sounds like the gem of it is that whatever our experiences with self-reflection and attunement, self-attunement, we get the gem. We get
Mhm.
the silver light. We get the healing.
Right.
Yeah. Regardless of whether it was, yes, it's something inside of me that's being reflected, or no, it's actually, there's actually something funky going on there. And the reflection for me is to say no.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And that was just the way that the lesson was brought.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting close to the end of our wonderful conversation, sadly. And so what I would love to do is for our audience who are identifying and, you know, maybe like struggling with some of these things or experiencing some of these things, how do we use our body? How do we use embodiment to help us connect with our well-being within all the realms of conscious relationship, but particularly when there's some friction or projection or issues going on? How do we use embodiment as a tool for connection?
Sure. Sure. You know, the first thing that just intuitively comes to me is understanding that we have a relationship with our bodies. We do in some form or other. For most people, they didn't consciously choose the relationship that they have. They ended up in it and they haven't chose differently yet because either they're not aware that that's an option or their body has been a very challenging place for them to inhabit in this lifetime for various reasons. But understanding like we have a relationship, and as we step into recognizing that we can make small choices every day to choose how we show up in our bodies is really a foundational piece of starting to become embodied,
Yeah.
right? It can be challenging to skip from, hey, I have experienced severe trauma to my body, to my human organism, to I love my body. I feel free and expressed and here I am world. That's not a realistic leap to make for most people. So even going to like, okay, I'm in a body. I'm in a body. This body is mine for this lifetime. And there's an option here. And if what I'm experiencing right now doesn't feel good for me, what else could there be? Even if the person doesn't have the answer, just what else could there be? I believe, I hope, I trust that there is some other way that I can relate to my body so that I can feel safe being embodied. What, okay, just opening that line of questioning and saying, okay, what do I need? What would my body need to feel safe for me to inhabit it and to be in the present moment? Because when we're living in the past or living in the future, which is what we're in the habit of doing, we're not embodied. We're somewhere else mentally. So, what conditions would need to be present for me to feel safe to be here now? Does it mean that I have silence? Does it mean that whatever those conditions would be, does it mean that I have to move out? Does it mean that I need more space for myself? Does it mean that I need to down regulate at night? Whatever it is, what would allow me to feel safe? And then when we're operating on a foundation of safety as much as we can, then what does my body need? And embodiment can come in so many different forms. There's no better way than another. And that can be anything from dance to just self-touch, embody like, wow, do I know what my elbow feels like? I don't ever touch it except for when I'm slapping lotion on. What if I could really become acquainted with my elbow or my pinky toe or my inner thigh? That's a form of embodiment. Or just getting to be here in the present moment and relating to ourselves as a human being with a body can be profound embodiment. And of course, I know you've had, this is where your work is, and so many of the wonderful guests you've had on is, okay, now that we're here, like, what do we want to do with it? How do we want to experience it? How do we want to access pleasure and joy and emotion through the body? But I think the foundation is understanding we have a relationship and starting to ask how we can create safety for our bodies so that we can be here now in the body.
And I love that, asking that question, because there's a quote from the Bible, and I haven't ever read the Bible, so I don't know if I'm repeating this correctly, but it's like if you open the door a crack, like the love of, I'm sure they say Jesus, but the love of, whatever, the universe will flood in. So it's like that just asking the question, what does my body need to feel safe? opens the door just enough for God, the universe, whatever, for that answer to arise. Because ultimately, I think that, like ultimately the thing is the belief in the benevolence of the universe.
Yes.
Right? I think that's part of what we're talking about. Like, there has to be an acceptance or a trust or a belief that the nature of the universe is inherently good.
Yes.
Nature of the universe is inherently supportive. And if we
Yes.
extend our hands out, if we reach our hands out for support, that we will receive it. May not look
Yes.
exactly the way we think it will, but we will receive that support. So
Yes.
that's a huge piece of it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Yay. So for people who want to walk this journey with you and begin cultivate conscious partnerships with themselves and in their relationships, how can they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So you can find me on my website, leenoto.com, Leenoto, and or on Instagram at leenoto_. And this is, a journey that I've been cultivating myself. I lead this work, and I lead this work with my partner as well. So we've got a bunch of just really beautiful personal accounts in store in helping others walk a path that we too ourselves are walking.
Wonderful. So you have options for people to get support with you and your partner,
Yes.
workshops, classes, coaching, that sort of thing. Are you in the time
Yes.
of COVID? Are you doing a lot online now?
We are doing a lot online. We do have a couple of clients that we're working with in an intensive style format.
Mhm.
A part of the work that my partner and I do is not only through the realm of transformational coaching, but through the intentional use of specific psychedelic substances for transformation. So when we do that work, that's in person, but typically we do a lot of our transformational work online.
Oh, beautiful. So plant spirit medicine.
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Yes. Deep
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah. I love that earth medicine.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Lee. It has been such a delight to talk with you and to share with you.
Same here. This is the highlight. I'm going to say the highlight of my week, and we're not even like completely through it yet. It's been such an honor to get to. I feel like in this conversation, we celebrated life.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would love to have another conversation with you in the future and you and your partner about the use of psychedelics for transformation.
Oh, we can go on. We would be honored to get to speak
Okay.
with you about that.
Awesome. All right, audience, give that a thumbs up and we will set that up. I love it. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, everyone listening. We so appreciate and value. Make sure that you subscribe to Sex is Medicine and YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, all the places. Celebrate the ASECT Award. You guys, it's really amazing. We never believed that was possible.
Yes.
And we dedicate all the merit from all of these shows and all of your joy and enrichment to the benefit and welfare of all sentient beings. Wishing you all happiness and joy. We'll see you next week. Blessings.